Lawrence has fallen in love with my roommate. He brought my roommate, openly confronting our parents, to announce the end of our childhood engagement. Pointing at me, he said to both sets of parents, I never liked her at all, marrying her would only disgust me. That became the last day I loved Lawrence. Later on, other boys confessed their feelings to me, yet he desperately tried to prevent me from being with anyone else. Clutching the marriage contract he had once written for me in our childhood. You promised that you would only marry me when we grew up. Chapter 1. When Lawrence got into a heated argument with my roommate and his parents, I had just arrived. I shook off the snow from my shoes, preparing to push open the door. I've already said it, I never acknowledged that absurd childhood engagement. The cold, mocking voice of the boy made me pause in my door-opening motion. That was something your parents decided when you were very young. Are you trying to embarrass Carrie's family by bringing this girl here? Through the crack, I saw Lawrence arguing with his father. My parents sat silently on the side, their expressions not looking too good. This is my girlfriend. Lawrence held my roommate Rita's hand, asserting his authority. His father's face turned red with anger. You can only marry Carrie, you have no choice. My hand trembled, and I accidentally pushed the door open. All eyes were on me. Lawrence looked at his parents with cold indifference, pointing at me. His words hit the ground like thunder. I never liked her at all, marrying her would only disgust me. Without waiting for a response, he left with Rita. Everyone's gaze fell upon me. Lawrence's parent hurriedly apologized behind me, while my father's anger flared up, wishing to catch up to Lawrence and give him a beating. I just stared at their retreating figures. Lawrence and I grew up together. For all these years, he never denied this childhood engagement to anyone. Even when others made fun of it, he laughed alone. I thought he felt the same way about me as I did about him. Chapter 2. That night, after being comforted by my parents in turns for 2 hours, I was finally allowed to go to bed. My mom took a day off for me, so I didn't go back to my dorm room. Just as I was about to fall asleep, the phone on the bedside table lit up. It was a message from Lawrence. I'm downstairs at your house, come down, let's talk. I remembered his words today. My childhood friend, who maliciously hurt me to be with another girl. That night, I didn't go down after all. But I couldn't sleep peacefully either. I had a fragmented dream. Young Lawrence sitting at the desk, diligently writing something stroke by stroke. Soon, he finished writing and jumped off the chair. He ran up to me in my childhood self. Don't cry, Carrie. Marry me in the future. His soft, tender hand handed me the marriage contract he created, with sincere and clear eyes. I will protect Carrie in the future. The moon pushed away the last bit of darkness and the light shone into my eyes. In a half-dream state, I wiped away the wetness at the corner of my eyes. Chapter 3. The next morning, on my way to school, I was once again stopped by Lawrence. It's still early to be leaving at this time. Did you skip breakfast again? His familiar tone made me pause for a moment. Lawrence handed me a bag of prepared breakfast. Carrie, what I said yesterday wasn't intentionally directed at you. I was just frustrated in the moment, which led me to say those things. I stepped back, avoiding the bag of breakfast. No need, eating your breakfast will only make me sick. Lawrence took his hand back, looking at me intently. His voice grew heavy. Does venting your anger by scolding me make you feel better? Carrie, I hope you won't cause trouble for Rita. She hasn't done anything wrong, it was me who fell for her first. I have to admit, Lawrence was quite perceptive. But it was Rita who provoked me first. We both arrived at school separately. Just as I entered the classroom and sat in my seat, Rita walked over holding a glass of milk. Her voice was neither loud nor soft, just enough to drown out the sparse studying noises in the class. For a moment, everyone's gaze shifted towards us. Carrie, please have some milk. Can you forgive me? I lowered my eyes to the milk, then looked at her. What did you do wrong that I should forgive you? Rita placed the milk on my desk, her eyes slightly red. I shouldn't have accepted Lawrence's friend request on WeChat. I didn't know he was your childhood friend. Her voice choked up slightly, and she tugged at my sleeve. Carrie, can you please not be mad at me? As long as you're not mad at me, I can give Lawrence back to you. I was about to speak when another voice interrupted. It was Rita's best friend. She chuckled angrily, speaking up for Rita's justice. Rita, do you really need to apologize? Carrie and Lawrence are just friends, right? You didn't steal her boyfriend, so what is there to apologize for? And, I must say, Carrie, could you please tone down your princess attitude? Don't act all aloof. With this exchange, the drama reached its peak. The two of you, one playing the angry face and the other playing the innocent face, right? After saying that, I pulled Rita's hand. I didn't exert much force, but she let out a cry and stumbled to the side. Ah! She knocked over my desk, and the hot milk spilled onto her. That's when Lawrence walked in. Rita, are you hurt? He took off his shirt and covered Rita with it, his eyes filled with concern. It's nothing, Lawrence. The onlookers around us cast blaming glances at me. What did I do? She ran into it herself. I found it somewhat amusing. Lawrence heard me, but all his attention was focused on Rita. I'll carry you to the infirmary first, endure it for a bit. He lifted Rita horizontally, not averting his gaze from her. From beginning to end, he treated me as if I were invisible. In the afternoon, Rita's best friend couldn't stand it and sought revenge on my behalf. I had just finished boiling water and was met with her face on the way out. She deliberately bumped into me, spilling the water from her cup onto me. And then she pushed me down. Sorry, I didn't mean to. She shrugged and left nonchalantly. I looked up and coincidentally met Lawrence's gaze not far away. He simply looked down at me from above, his expression as cold as if he were looking at a stranger. 1 second before the bell rang, I walked into the classroom with my wet body. I held a bottle in my hand, filled with lukewarm, pale yellow liquid. Before anyone could react, I unscrewed the lid. The liquid poured down, thoroughly drenching the girl. It was intentional, and I have no intention of apologizing to you, she exclaimed as she stood up. What is this? What did you pour on me? I tugged at the corner of my mouth, without explaining. It wasn't until the incident escalated that I clarified with the homeroom teacher. It was just a bottle of hot water, along with 2 tea leaves. Chapter 4. After this incident, I was isolated by the entire class. Everyone avoided me. I even started to question myself. Did I do something wrong? If I didn't, then why am I the one being excluded? Meanwhile, Lawrence and Rita had gained a reputation as the couple of top students in the class. The day they publicly announced their relationship was also the day I confessed to Lawrence. On Friday night, there's a class gathering. Will you come? The class monitor hesitated for a while, asked everyone, and then cautiously approached me. I maintained a calm demeanor on the surface, but my hands under the table involuntarily clenched. Sure, I'll come. I thought, maybe I wasn't as rejected as I thought. In the clubroom, we all sat together playing Truth or Dare. It landed on Lawrence. Someone smirked and asked, Lawrence, if your little crush Carrie and your rumored girlfriend Rita both fell into the water, who would you save? At that moment, I didn't even think. The words just came out. Lawrence and Rita were sitting right across from me. The air instantly became tense. I lowered my gaze, staring at the juice in front of me without blinking. I knew I could find an excuse to leave the room. But inexplicably, I didn't move. The boy across from me suddenly chuckled. His tone was casual. What's a rumored girlfriend? This is my girlfriend, didn't I tell you guys? From the corner of his eye, he wrapped his arm around Rita's shoulder. He asked, Rita, can you swim? I'm terrible at swimming. The girl blushed a little, feeling embarrassed. Lawrence sighed lightly, his words filled with indulgence. Well, if you fell into the sea, wouldn't I have to hold you and swim all the way? He didn't directly answer the question, but the answer was already obvious. And it was only natural. Rita was his girlfriend. It's only right to save your girlfriend first. I gently closed my eyes, suppressing the bitterness in my heart. Everyone was uproariously realizing that the top student, Lawrence, was like this when he was in love. I even held my breath lightly, lowering my presence even more, afraid of being looked at with pity and mockery. But Rita didn't seem to want to let me off so easily. When it was my turn, she smiled innocently. She playfully asked, Carrie, is there anyone you like? Even if it's someone you've liked before. She said the most cutting words with a playful tone, making everyone think she was just joking. If you tell a lie, your whole family will be cursed, you know. I felt cornered, as if there was no way out. If I were to stand up now and cause a scene, I would probably be permanently isolated. And I would be looked at by my classmates with strange eyes. I slightly lifted my eyes and met Rita's gaze. Yes. Before the words even finished, I felt Lawrence's gaze sharply turn towards me. Rita smiled and hooked her arm around Lawrence's. Got it. In the past, I would have felt utterly embarrassed and exposed in a situation like this. But now, after admitting that I had once liked Lawrence, that kind of emotion felt so distant. It was as if a gentle breeze had swept away the last trace of my unclear feelings for Lawrence. The breeze passed, leaving no trace on the water's surface. In my 17th year, I let go of my 3-year-long crush. I finally confirmed that I no longer liked Lawrence. Chapter 5. Kari. After the gathering ended, before I left, Lawrence called out to me. He approached me, his expression complex. Today, you said the person you like. He paused for 2 seconds before continuing. Is it me? To be honest, I no longer have any positive feelings towards the guy standing in front of me. Yes, I added, but it was in the past. At the moment you pointed at me and said it would be disgusting to marry me, I decided that I no longer liked you. Besides, you have a girlfriend now, and I have truly moved on. Lawrence tightly pursed his lips, remaining silent. I never intended to hurt you, I always saw you as a little sister. I didn't want to listen to his feeble words anymore. Carrie, I will make it up to you. Even though I immediately refused. And showed it through my actions. I really wanted to stay away from you and your girlfriend. But Lawrence couldn't understand, he did many useless things to make up for his guilt. He would insist on bringing me breakfast. Even though I would throw it back at him every time. His occasional thoughtfulness and care. Rita couldn't see my avoidance, she thought I was trying to steal Lawrence away. She started to act out one after another. The day before the mock exam results were released, Rita was called alone to the office. When she came back, she collapsed on the desk and cried. Rumors started spreading in the class that she had cheated on this exam. Whether it was Lawrence or her friends, the majority of people didn't believe that Rita would cheat. After all, she was the second-ranked student right behind Lawrence. How could Rita, the top student, do something like that? That cheat sheet they found must not be hers. Yeah, Rita is not that kind of person, right? I didn't pay much attention to it. But I do remember that I did well on this exam, and after checking the answers, I realized I made fewer mistakes than before. When the grades were released, I hadn't even been happy for long before Lawrence blocked my way home. Kari, did you do it? I was confused. What? Blaming Rita for cheating, wasn't that you? That note, wasn't it you who placed it? He questioned me coldly, cornering me step by step. Are you kidding me? I sneered. Do you really think I care about her? Just looking for trouble? Lawrence stared at me intently. Then why did you score 27 points higher than last time? Can't I just improve on my own? I couldn't stand it anymore. Lawrence, don't be so paranoid. His expression became dark and unclear. Suddenly, he chuckled mockingly. Carrie, how did you become like this? Blaming and framing others, without remorse. Lawrence shook his head, disappointment filling his eyes. Is this how you were brought up? I laughed in anger, about to retort. Lawrence unlocked his phone, showing me a surveillance video. From the moment the exams were collected until before noon when school ended. Only I entered the office. This was Rita's plan. The cheat sheet was intentionally placed inside the exam booklet by her. She knew the answers to those questions, which is why no one believes she cheated. Combined with this video footage, I was directly accused and condemned. Lawrence looked down on me with superiority. With indifference, he left me with a final remark. Carrie, everyone has to take responsibility for their actions. Chapter 6. I put my last hope in the homeroom teacher. After all, this matter couldn't rely on solid evidence. It was all based on subjective judgments. But the homeroom teacher just blamed me with a reproachful look. Carrie, what is your purpose in doing this? Are you jealous that Rita has better grades than you? My throat instantly went dry, and all my strength was drained from me. I couldn't utter a word. When Lawrence accompanied Rita into the office, she still had tears in her eyes. Carrie, weren't we close roommates? I always considered you a good friend. Is this how you treat me? She grabbed a thick book from the desk and slammed it directly into my face, while crying out. My life almost got tainted because of you, do you know that? Lawrence just turned his head away, not saying a word. The homeroom teacher casually scolded Rita for not resorting to violence. Before she could retaliate against me, she looked at me warningly, changing the subject. Carrie, apologize, and I won't cancel your grades or give you a disciplinary record. If my grades were cancelled, I would be separated from the top class in our final year. But I didn't do anything, how could I admit it? I'll say it once, I didn't falsely accuse Rita of cheating. As soon as the words left my mouth, I felt a cool sensation on my nose. Rita had quite the strength, and she had slapped me, causing my nose to bleed. Without paying any attention to the bewildered expressions of the three of them, I left straight away. Stop. Lawrence chased after me, blocking my way. He frowned when he saw my bleeding nose. But his words were accusatory. Carrie, you must apologize to Rita. She shouldn't bear this slander because of you. I lightly wiped away the blood from my nose and held out my hand for him to see. In a very soft voice, I said, Lawrence, can I go clean up first? I felt exhausted. Like a person hanging on the edge of a cliff, I no longer had the strength to hold on to that lifeline. I didn't even want to argue with him anymore. Lawrence furrowed his brow tightly. I'll take you. As he said that, he reached out to pull me. I slightly stepped back, lowering my gaze without any emotion. Lawrence, I beg you, just stay away. Chapter 7. In the end, I still didn't apologize to Rita. But it seemed like everyone had silently accepted that I was framing Rita. Classmates who used to ignore me started pointing fingers and criticizing me. My exam paper, which was 27 points higher than usual, was also deemed invalid. My seemingly stable emotions were now on the verge of crumbling. It was the school-arranged spring outing. No one was allowed to be absent unless there was a compelling reason, so it became another opportunity for Rita to set me up. Rita and Carrie, go pick up tree branches. After entering the dense forest, Rita's true nature was exposed. I calmly pressed the record button on the recorder in my bag. Carrie, it must be painful for you to see your childhood sweetheart taken away, right? She stood behind me, nonchalant. I guided her words. So, you intentionally framed me with that cheat sheet, just to make Lawrence completely despise me and prevent me from taking him back? She glanced around before smiling. Yeah, no one believes you're innocent. How about when that book was slammed into your face? Did it hurt? I obtained the information I wanted and had no intention of prolonging the confrontation. With this recording, she would be completely exposed and face disciplinary action, possibly even transferring to another class. But she wasn't satisfied. In the moment I turned around, she forcefully pushed me. Ah! As I rolled down the slope, Rita, in her moment of triumph, also stumbled and tumbled down. We both ended up hanging onto the trunk of a tree on the slope. In a precarious situation. Chapter 8. I tried to save myself, but it was completely useless. Lawrence must have heard Rita's cry for help and was the first to rush over. Lawrence, I'm so scared. She looked at Lawrence with a pitiful expression. The boy's gazes towards me were filled with sympathy. Sorry, Carrie. He reached out his hand towards Rita. After Rita gets up, I'll immediately pull you up. Upon hearing these words, Rita's expression froze. She followed Lawrence's strength and climbed up. I pursed my lips. All right, thank you. I had nothing to complain about. Rita was his girlfriend, and it was only natural for him to save her first. Even the fact that he was willing to help me was beyond my expectations. I thought he wouldn't take this risk and would just go back to find our homeroom teacher for help. But as Rita climbed, she suddenly stepped on my hand, pressing back and forth, using her other foot for leverage, making it seem like she accidentally stepped on me. I felt the pain and instinctively let go, rolling down the hill. Carrie! Carrie! I could hear Lawrence and Rita's voices. Even at this moment, she didn't forget to put on a show. Luckily, there were thick layers of fallen leaves beneath me, and the slope was relatively gentle. In the end, my back collided with the tree trunk, bringing me to a stop. I had various cuts and bruises all over my body. But Carrie suffered the most severe injury, the impact on her back from hitting the tree trunk. After slowly propping myself up against the tree and standing up, I realized the biggest problem. I was lost. There was no signal on my phone either. Meanwhile, on the other side, Rita was desperately trying to prevent anyone from rescuing me. Chapter 9. I eventually stumbled out of the woods, relying on the compass and my phone. But when I returned to the meeting point, I realized everyone had left. I stopped dialing my teacher's number. With a cold laugh, I turned and called my parents instead. The injuries weren't too severe, but I still had to stay in the hospital for observation for a day. Lawrence entered the hospital room after my parents had gone home in the evening. Carrie. His voice sounded hoarse. At that moment, I was staring blankly at the dark sky outside the window. Lawrence. In the corner of my eye, the boy approached. Only then did I slowly speak. Today, during the day, while I was trying to find a way out of the forest, I suddenly remembered our autumn outing to the forest park in 8th grade. My words paused, and I looked at him. Do you remember? He looked bewildered, obviously not remembering. I remained unaffected and continued talking to him, like an observer narrating someone else's emotions. Calm and unfamiliar. That time, when I got bitten by a snake, you knew it wasn't venomous, but you immediately carried me to the hospital. It was particularly hot then, and you ran, drenched in sweat, but you didn't put me down, because you knew I was afraid of pain. At that time, while I was lying on your back, I thought. I sighed softly. I really liked you, Lawrence. How can a person change so quickly? Why would my childhood friend, who used to be so caring and always put me first, now point at me and say disgusting things? Why would he allow others to hurt me? Even when I was in a life or death situation, he chose to stand by and do nothing. Regret filled Lawrence's eyes. He couldn't defend himself. He could only apologize blindly. I was wrong, Carrie, I was really wrong. Can you forgive me? I won't leave you alone again. I took a deep breath. Looking at the boy in front of me, I raised my hand and slapped him. Lawrence, how dare you ask for my forgiveness? I stared at him. You saved Rita first, she's your girlfriend, I have no right to blame you. But you knew it was dangerous for me to fall down, even if we've only known each other for over 10 years, just as classmates. Couldn't you at least inform the teacher or call for help? You're as heartless as an animal. What if I hadn't made it out of the woods? I might not have had the chance to listen to his nonsense. Lawrence seemed crushed and unable to stand. He knelt by my bed, reaching out as if to hold my hand. His voice trembled, and his dark eyes were filled with pain. I'm sorry, Carrie, I forgot. I really forgot. At that time, Rita was in a critical condition. I pulled at the corners of my dry mouth and looked away. How urgent could it have been for someone who didn't fall? Just go away. Lawrence didn't move, he just pleaded with his eyes. As my gaze fell on the glass on the side, Rita pushed open the door to the ward. But she seemed more injured than I, who fell down the slope. Sitting in a wheelchair, looking sickly. Carrie, don't blame Lawrence. Her eyes were slightly red, on the verge of tears. Because I sprained my foot, I'm too afraid of pain, so I had to beg Lawrence to take me to the hospital first. Well, that was her urgent situation. I'm sorry. I thought my boyfriend would always put me first. I forgot that Lawrence is different, he has you as his childhood friend. I was too selfish. As she choked on her words, she tried to stand up. Just before she fell, Lawrence ran over and caught her. Then he carried her back to the wheelchair. When he turned his head to look at me, my emotions suddenly burst. I collapsed and threw the object next to me at them. Lawrence shielded Rita in front of him. His forehead was cut, blood seeping out. Go away, I can't stand looking at you two for another second. I stared at them, speaking each word. You both make me sick. Rita considered him deeply. She tugged at Lawrence's sleeve, ready to leave. Lawrence looked at me in silence for a long time. Just before they pulled the door open and left, I suddenly spoke up. Rita. The figure in the wheelchair froze. Before falling down the slope, you gave me a gift. I stared deeply at her back, unconsciously gripping the bedsheet tightly, trembling. I will definitely make good use of it. She paused for only a second and nonchalantly left. To Rita, everything she did was flawless. And with her victory every time unscathed, she couldn't help but become complacent. So, she didn't take my words seriously. She even sent a pre-recorded video provocation right after leaving. It must have been recorded by the camera she set up in advance. Rita only sprained her foot. But Lawrence, afraid that she might have other injuries, insisted on staying in the hospital for observation for a day. In the video, Rita hugged Lawrence's waist, speaking softly. Are you mad at me for not letting you save Carrie in time? Lawrence touched her head and sighed softly. No, I'm not. Rita hugged him even tighter. Because you're my boyfriend, and I can only turn to you when I'm scared. I thought I was the most important person to you. The blurry video. Lawrence's voice echoed clearly in the ward. Rita, you've always been the most important person to me. As soon as he finished speaking, he held her chin and leaned in for a kiss. Following the video was a message. That's why Lawrence didn't go down the slope to find you. My eyes slightly lost focus as I turned off my phone. Lost in thought, I wondered what I was doing while they were kissing. Oh. I was anxiously guarding against being bitten by snakes, enduring the pain in my body. Step by step, relying on myself, I made my way out of the woods. The evening wind the day was colder than usual. Chapter 10. Although I already have the recording, which is enough evidence to prove that Rita was the mastermind behind cheating on the exam, there is one tricky thing, she did push me down the slope. But there is no evidence to prove it. A recording alone would only have a minimal impact on her, in my opinion. Just as I was hesitating whether to hand over the recording, my classmate Sarah approached me after we returned to school during free time. She walked towards me when no one else was paying attention. Carrie, I saw everything, she said. I looked up at her. She continued, that day, I wanted to go to a secluded place to relieve myself, and I happened to see Rita pushing you. And she lied to the teacher, so no one went to save you. Seeing that I didn't respond, her face turned slightly red as she explained slowly. At that time, I didn't dare to speak up immediately. I was afraid that if you died there would be no evidence. I was afraid that Rita would target me. It was a natural reaction. After all, she dared to push me down, showing a disregard for human life. I continued calmly, probing her words. Even if you saw it, eyewitness testimony alone cannot convict her. Sarah looked around, hesitating to speak. I remained quiet, waiting patiently. Carrie, your family is wealthy. If I provide you with evidence, can you really make her go to jail? She tightly pursed her lips, showing fear. Because if I can't really make her go to jail, I'm afraid she will retaliate against me. I nodded, then suddenly smiled. Do you know? Rita just turned 18. This meant that even the law couldn't treat her leniently anymore. Sarah finally felt relieved. She took out her phone and showed me the video clip. From her perspective, it clearly captured Rita intentionally pushing me. As for the incident of Rita lying to the teacher, there were even more witnesses, according to Sarah. After they returned, Rita sent Lawrence to find a car for her and take her to the hospital. And when everyone was searching for me and about to leave, she stopped them. Teacher, Carrie told me that she wasn't feeling well and left early. I saw her family's car picking her up. The homeroom teacher was skeptical. Then I'll have to call her parents to confirm. Rita visibly grew nervous. Why is there no signal? The teacher frowned, looking at her phone. Rita didn't give her a second chance to make the call. Teacher, don't you believe me? Isn't it normal for Carrie to leave early? After all, her family is so wealthy, maybe she couldn't adapt to this kind of autumn trip. Ever since the incident when Rita smeared my reputation, I vaguely felt that the homeroom teacher had some unexplained bias against me, and her favoritism towards Rita. At first, I thought she liked Rita because of her good grades. Now it seems that it's not the only reason. She probably has some sort of resentment towards the wealthy. Rita took advantage of this mentality, subtly mentioning my family background to fuel her dissatisfaction. At the right moment, Rita feigned pain and changed the subject. Teacher, I twisted my foot, and it's quite swollen. Could you please inform my parents? She smoothly executed her tactics, leaving me completely deprived of any chance of rescue. Chapter 11. Rita is completely finished. But suddenly, I didn't want her to be done for just yet. During Tuesday's break, when no one was paying attention, I sneaked into the broadcasting room. Facing the microphone, I pressed the record button. How did it feel? When that book hit you in the face, it must have hurt, right? Rita's voice resonated clearly in everyone's ears. Unfortunately, I couldn't see her expression at that moment. Although I was scolded by the headmaster for it, Rita's reputation was completely shattered. No way, Rita, the top student, actually wrote that note herself. Wow, how disgusting can she be? My classmates openly discussed the matter. I witnessed Rita's face growing paler and paler. Lawrence also had a troubled expression. He intercepted me on my way to get hot water. His eyes were filled with panic and apology. Kari. I misunderstood. I spoke while twisting the lid on the cup. If you have something to say it all at once. After a moment of hesitation, he finally spoke. Can you forgive me? His tone was cautious. Without hesitation, I splashed the water in his face. Though it wasn't scalding hot, it was enough to make him look disheveled. Lawrence, I only ask you, if you were in my place, do you think you could forgive? Lawrence stood motionless, allowing me to pour the water. The droplets fell from his hair as he lowered his gaze, giving a bitter smile. Are you really starting to hate me? You don't even want our friendship of over 10 years anymore. The early spring wind was still chilling, almost piercing, especially for Lawrence, whose school uniform was soaked. He shivered from the cold, but still waited eagerly for my response. Lawrence, you don't have the right to bring up those 10 years with me. As soon as I finished speaking, the hopeful light in his eyes dimmed instantly. When I turned to leave, a soft questioning voice sounded from behind. Is it true, you can't forgive me? How can I forgive? How can I forgive someone whose actions made me completely let go of a friendship of over 10 years in just 2 short months? Chapter 12. Rita thought that was it, but I sent her another message, leading her to the equipment room. The content was a screenshot of a video segment Sarah sent me. What else do you want? Rita gritted her teeth, her face turning gray. It seemed like she hadn't been having a good few days. I held a chinois dictionary that was about 6 centimeters thick in my hand. I weighed it in my hand. Slap yourself, then we can talk about ending it. Or should I do it? You choose. Rita was afraid that I would hold a grudge and seek revenge recklessly. Suppressing her anger, she started slapping herself. The red marks on her face grew deeper, swollen, and uneven. Suddenly, footsteps were heard outside the equipment room. I panicked a little. 2 girls alone together, one of them with a swollen face. Knowing Rita's temperament, I would most likely be labeled as a bully. While I was still dazed, the footsteps grew closer. I looked towards the slightly ajar door. Just as I stood there, startled, the door was closed. In other words, the person outside helped me close the door. Me. A kind act. After Rita made her nose bleed from slapping herself, I stopped her. Please. She moved her lips slightly, not daring to touch her wound. Don't give the video to the police. I still want to take the college entrance exam. I chuckled lightly, mocking her absurdity. I pushed the door open and left without hesitation. Are you done? A small voice suddenly sounded by the door, making me tremble. The kind person who closed the door for me happened to be Sarah, who passed by. I was watching out for you. No one saw you hit her. I didn't hit her. From the beginning, I had no intention of laying a finger on her. Rita slapped herself, so there was no blame on my part. Thank you. I nodded at her and intended to leave. Kari. She hesitated. A few seconds later, she forcefully placed her bubble tea in my hand without saying a word. Sorry for not knowing the truth earlier and joining everyone in isolating you. She spoke quickly, all in one breath. If you have any problems with your studies, you can come find me. Or if you need help with anything else, goodbye. After saying that, she hurriedly left without looking back. I stared blankly at the warm bubble tea in my hand. This was the first act of kindness I received since being isolated. Chapter 13. That afternoon after school, I went to the police station with the video. I stood at the school gate, watching Rita being taken away by the police. She was crying and pleading. Please, don't take me away. I'm about to take the college entrance exam. Please, at least let me finish the exam, okay? The police car slowly shrank in my sight until it disappeared completely. Inappropriately, I remembered a time when Rita surpassed Lawrence and became the top of our age group. I remember her eyes shining with stars. The homeroom teacher couldn't escape either. Her irresponsibility, strong bias against students, and inability to distinguish right from wrong. In the end, she had to pay the price. Before she was dismissed, she came to me, hoping that I could write a letter of forgiveness for her. Why should I? I couldn't control my disgust. Letting someone like you continue to be a teacher is irresponsible for any school towards its students. People like you should be like ants, always being stepped on by the people they hate the most, bowing and kneeling, only then would they deserve punishment. We got a new homeroom teacher. Gradually, everyone realized that they had misunderstood me. They started approaching me, trying to strike up conversations and inviting me to have meals together. But I started to feel uncomfortable. It's not that I'm being melodramatic. I've already gotten used to being alone. I persuaded myself that there are many benefits to being alone. But as I gradually accepted being alone, I began to adapt to another kind of liveliness. Exclusivity inevitably emerged. So, when the class leader asked me again if I wanted to join the class dinner, I thought about it and still shook my head in refusal. But not all group activities can be rejected. For example, the literary committee took the initiative to sign up the whole class for a choir performance. At that time, I never expected that I, who was isolated and excluded 2 months ago, would suddenly become popular now. Chapter 14. On the day of the art festival. After changing my clothes, I hesitated for a while before coming out of the restroom. The size of the outfit seemed off. The top was excessively short. With a slight raise of my hand, my waist was exposed. Kari. Lawrence has been sporadically cooperating with the police investigation recently, so he hasn't been at school much. I stopped in my tracks, furrowing my brow. What are you up to now? Although Lawrence hasn't committed any substantial wrongdoing. But considering his involvement in everything, he received a disciplinary action. Lawrence didn't pay attention to my rejection, his gaze deepening. I broke up with Rita. I didn't know she had done so many wrong things before. I was about to speak, but he beat me to it. I know you hate me. He self-mockingly tugged at the corner of his mouth. I'm here today just to explain to you that I genuinely didn't know about the things she did before. Whether you believe it or not, Kari, I've never had ill intentions towards you. If it wasn't for Rita's instigation. He leaned against the wall, his shoulders slumping, and shook his head with a bitter smile. We wouldn't be like this at all. Lawrence, you've truly become rotten now. I rubbed my temples, feeling a bit exhausted. Can you really find peace by shifting all the blame onto Rita? Did someone force you to be with her? Lawrence lifted his gaze, and our eyes met. Helplessness filled his entire being. What am I supposed to do, Kari? I really don't know what I can do to make you stop rejecting me so much. His gaze suddenly turned dim, his expression unclear. I don't even know what's happening to me, Kari, I seem to. I couldn't bear to hear the rest of his words. I didn't want to know how he felt about me. I walked past him and headed towards the backstage dressing room. Before going on stage, someone unintentionally captured a shot of me slightly revealing my waist. And it was posted on the confession wall. This girl is my type, please leave a contact. Oh, I've seen her, she's probably performing on stage for this class. The excitement gradually intensified. It was only when I returned backstage and someone blocked my path that I found out what was going on. Classmate, can I add you on WeChat? A slightly blushing boy was half pushed by a few boys behind him, looking awkward. I was a bit confused and was about to refuse when Lawrence walked through the crowd and came up to me. "Carrie, congratulations on your successful performance." He smiled and placed a bouquet of flowers in my arms. "Wait, who is he?" I overheard whispers from onlookers. "I don't know, but it seems like Carrie's boyfriend from the looks of it." The voice wasn't too soft, at least both Lawrence and I could hear it clearly. And then someone actually came up to ask, "Hey, buddy, is she your girlfriend?" The person pointed at me and asked Lawrence. He didn't deny it, just raised an eyebrow. "So, don't ask for her WeChat." I found it amusing. I stepped forward and threw the flowers back into Lawrence's arms. "I have nothing to do with him." Leaving those words behind, I ignored Lawrence's darkening expression and walked away. Chapter 15. But it seemed like he was persistent. After school in the evening, he followed me all the way. "Carrie, we used to have a childhood betrothal." I didn't deny it today, but it was just to prevent them from spreading your WeChat. I looked at him for 2 seconds, then suddenly realized that he still hadn't realized his mistake. "Lawrence, do you remember when you wrote me a marriage proposal when we were kids?" I turned my head slightly, my gaze fixed on a certain spot. There was no fluctuation in my voice. But with the sudden drop in temperature, my tone also felt slightly cold. I was too young back then, even though I didn't understand the meaning of marriage. But I knew that it meant I could be with Lawrence forever, and I felt at ease. I looked again at the boy in front of me, his eyes reddened. "Because he said Lawrence would always protect me. But you went back on your own offer of betrothal and didn't do anything." Lawrence broke down, kneeling beside me. He tightly grasped the back of my hand. "Stop, Carrie, I've done so many wrong things." I slowly pulled my hand away and looked down at him from above. "Yes, you've done wrong. The harm you caused me is unforgivable. Lawrence, I will never forgive you in my lifetime. So please, stop bothering me." That day, he didn't give in. But as he left, he said that he seemed to have fallen for the wrong person. When I got home, I suddenly remembered that I hadn't thrown away that piece of marriage proposal paper. After rummaging through boxes and drawers, I found it and didn't look at it again. I tore it up and threw it into the trash downstairs. For the following period of time, Lawrence indeed didn't bother me anymore. But we were still in the same class, and whenever I turned around, I would always catch him staring at me absent-mindedly. I looked at the countdown to the college entrance examination on the blackboard. Suppressing the frustration, I didn't want to provoke him anymore. But Lawrence, on one day, completely tore off his disguise. That became the last time I saw him until before the college entrance examination. Chapter 16. Although I didn't give that guy my WeChat that day. But he would occasionally come to our class during certain periods, bringing me snacks. I had no choice but to return them to him, which ended up wasting the entire class period. Later on, my frequent avoidance of him might have really annoyed him. One day after school, he confessed to me in front of everyone at the school gate. With a look of certainty on his face, coupled with the cheesy confession scene, it felt quite forced. "Sorry." I spoke in a businesslike tone. "I don't like. She doesn't like you. Are you done yet?" Lawrence wouldn't miss this grand scene. Today, he had a thin layer of hostility on his face. The guy turned around and looked at him inexplicably. "What's it to you?" Lawrence sneered, walked over, and punched him, causing him to stumble a few steps. "Of course, she has something to do with me." They started fighting right then and there. The pressure of the upcoming college entrance examination, combined with Lawrence's occasional entanglement, made me feel suffocated. Before the situation escalated, they stopped fighting, fortunately without involving the police. But my frustration had reached its peak. On an empty and deserted street, Lawrence stood in front of me with his head lowered as if he had done something wrong. "I didn't mean to disturb you, Carrie. I know you don't like him, I just wanted to help you get rid of him." "Lawrence!" My voice unintentionally raised. "Please, stop doing these meaningless things. You're only causing me more trouble now. When I was being bullied before, you didn't show up, and now it's even more unnecessary." He fell silent for a long time, and when he spoke again, it was still that pale "I'm sorry." He took out a crumpled piece of paper from his bag. "After you threw it away, I picked it up and slowly pieced it back together." The marriage proposal was wrapped in layers of tape. His voice choked, and his hands trembled slightly. "You promised that you would only marry me when we grew up. I don't remember that day very clearly. I only remember being frustrated by Lawrence's stubbornness and inability to listen. I seem to have scolded him for a long time and slapped him several times. In the end, I sat on the roadside, crying, begging him not to bother me anymore. I tore apart the meticulously pieced together marriage proposal once again, and Lawrence truly never appeared before me again. His parents gave him a leave of absence the next day, saying that he would study at home for the remaining month. Although I was somewhat surprised, I was mostly relieved. It wasn't until after the college entrance examination that I heard about Lawrence from my parents. On his way back home that night, he got into a car accident due to distraction. He could have been discharged from the hospital in time for the college entrance examination if he had cooperated with the treatment, but he was passive, refusing to take his medication. His mother even called my mother before the college entrance examination, hoping that I could persuade him. Upon hearing this, my dad snatched the phone away. The college entrance examination is his own business. If he wants to ruin himself, don't involve my daughter. Clearly, the anger from the public breakup had not subsided. I performed exceptionally well in this exam. The day I received my acceptance letter, I received a message from an unknown number. Congratulations on your outstanding performance in the college entrance examination. It was a formal message, and I immediately guessed it was from Lawrence. I didn't feel any fluctuations in my emotions and simply blocked the number. Breathing in the hot air, my heart remained unusually calm. In my mind, like a movie playing back, every moment of the ups and downs of the past 6 months unfolded. It all came to an end when I put down my pen on the last exam paper on the 8th. Some people got what they deserved. Some people regretted their actions. And as for me, I received the rewards I deserved. I held the acceptance letter in my hand and gazed towards the direction of my future university. I knew that my life was just beginning.